It seems to be a little known fact that your body is working against your gains. That every rep that you grind through, your body is actually working to undo it. So today we're going to dissect some of the science behind one of fitness's little known barriers, myostatin. It's kind of like the muscle brake and how it dictates your gains. I'll reveal how to suppress myostatin naturally and why you might be wasting a bit of your time when it comes to the workout windows that you afford yourself as part of your training program. And later on, I'll talk about how to extend your muscle growth window from 48 hours into something, a bit of a longer term opportunity. So what's the goal today? Well, by the end of this podcast, you'll know how to plan your nutrition and your programming of your weight training in order to take advantage of all the loopholes that are available to suppress myostatin. So this isn't all just a theory. This is some of the real world stuff that I've come across and that I've done in the past to get to where I am today. And this will all work for natural athletes, performance-based athletes, even those busy parents out there that barely have an hour to spend in the gym. So welcome to the channel. This is the Deep South Experiment and I'm Simon, and here we focus on fat loss, muscle building, and all the mindset that connects those two together. And more about me and the channel in the description below. So let's talk about myostatin. So a good place to start is, what is a myostatin inhibitor? Well, first of all, myostatin is a hormone inside your body that limits muscle growth. And it does this by suppressing protein synthesis and your satellite cells. But myostatin inhibitors do the exact opposite. They tell myostatin to take a back seat for the time being and allow muscle growth to come through. And there are, of course, multiple uses for myostatin inhibitors. We've got muscle wasting diseases, for example. People that are unfortunate to have those can use inhibitors to give them the best fighting chance against such a condition. And then you have the more controversial end of the spectrum, where you have athletes who just want to progress as fast as they can, perhaps at any cost. And they'll take myostatin inhibitors to allow that muscle growth to be as indefinite as it can be. But then there are risks associated with that approach, and any approach like this in fitness. Your muscles only grow so fast, and then you have things such as your tendons and your ligaments, even your bones, that have to keep up with that muscle growth. And we don't want to have that imbalance between an exceptionally strong muscle and then a somewhat strong tendon or ligament, because that is going to take you down the path to injury. But then what if I told you that you could actually hack this myostatin effect naturally, simply through a manipulation of nutrition and training, and to do it without drugs? So it's not all bad news, but I'll come to that a little bit later on in the podcast. So you might be asking, why does myostatin even exist? It's a bit of a pain in the backside. It's stopping you from doing what you want to do. Fantastic question, I might add. And the answer is not because your body hates you, but it's because it loves you and it wants to protect you. And this is coming from an evolutionary point of view. Well, we have the survival mechanism. So muscle actually costs the body a lot of energy to maintain and to build and to break down. So having muscle in the first place, or currently, actually costs the body a lot of money to maintain. Now, if food suddenly became scarce, and back in the day, you couldn't kill an animal and then eat it, you had to wait a few days or however long, that's bad. And the body always wants to do the worst case scenario. So should energy become scarce later on, we don't want to have all this muscle now. So the body is not really interested in building the maximum amount of muscle. It's interested in building only the correct amount of muscle, whatever it determines that to be, because it wants to survive long term. And then there's the here and the now, the protective mechanism. And as I alluded to before, Muscles can grow exceptionally strong, but then ligaments, tendons, bones, etc., they don't have the same blood supply. They can't catch up to the muscle as fast. They lag behind, and that can cause injury. And then I guess kind of related to that point is homeostasis. Or is it homeostasis? Don't know. Comment below. But let's go homeostasis, keeping the body balanced. The body does not want to have a massive tricep and small bicep, or massive quadricep, small hamstring. You know, the opposing muscle groups. It wants to try and keep a balance so that we can perform well and move effectively. Again, the protective mechanism. If we have to run from an animal that's trying to kill us, can we do it? Or are our hamstrings not up to speed of our quads? That kind of thing. So it's keeping the balance is what homeostasis and myostatin try to achieve. And I guess it's worth noting that myostatin is suppressed by resistance training. So the body is allowed to make a little bit of adaptation until myostatin springs back again and puts the brakes on, because it doesn't want too much muscle, doesn't want too much imbalance, and it wants to be able to survive. So it's a little cautious, allows you a little bit, then stops. And then this begs the question potentially of, how do professional athletes push themselves so far? How do they reach the heights that they reach, the records that they break? Every Olympic Games cycle, something else is broken, right? How does that actually occur? And it's another good question. So bear with me, and later on I'm going to come to satellite cells and recovery window and how that plays a role in helping you to progress the most that you can. So naturally we'll come on to the next question bubbling away, which is quite an exciting one about how the frequency of training affects myostatin. Now, you have a good resistance training session, and what good is another question. If you have a good session, 24 to 48 hours is a window that you're afforded whereby the result of your resistance training suppresses myostatin naturally and allows that window of growth to occur. And the question of frequency is a really interesting one, because we want to have as many windows of 24 to 48 hour periods as we can to allow ourselves an opportunity to grow as much as we can. But if you grow, or push yourself rather, too hard, too often, then you're going to burn out. So there's always a balance between the regularity or the frequency in which you're working out. And the other question is how hard are those muscles being pushed? A chest press, for example, targets your chest, but it also asks for help from your shoulders. So, to cut a long story short, you could do your shoulders one day, but then you don't have to do them again 48 or 72 hours later. Because if you have a chest workout scheduled, then they are also being asked to do a lot of work for that chest workout, not in isolation, just on their own. So it's always good to bear in mind during your program, how often are you hitting a particular body part, whether it is intentional or indirect? It is still being asked to work hard. So something to think about there. And the volume or the load that you're putting on your muscles is also an important one. Because you don't want to overtrain, but you do want to lift a weight that's going to create a stimulus for change. That's going to make the body go, hang on, got to do something here. That was heavy, that was hard work. Now, let's make a change. Let's grow some muscle while we have the chance, before that pesky myostatin comes along and says, stop what you're doing right now, because I want to survive in future and protect your ligaments, etc. And the recovery aspect, massively important. Make sure you rest and recover, you sleep, you get that nutrition that you need. Get a good dollop of protein inside of you. But the key takeaway here is make sure your training frequency is appropriate. Your load is going to be appropriate to allow you to train on a regular basis. And then when you do train on a regular basis, how hard are you going? How much weight are you lifting? And are you able to recover? Don't overtrain, but do stimulate often. Because it's a clear catch. is that overtraining can easily backfire. And later I'll explain how to not crush all of your gains by training too regularly. Because the last thing you want is poorly timed workouts. So the next question to move on to really is myostatin local or is it systemic? Therefore, is it localized to the shoulder, the chest, the biceps, the triceps, the quads, to a particular muscle? Or is it systemic? In fact, it's the whole body is affected by it. Or maybe parts of the body rather than one muscle group. So this myostatin suppression, which is what you want to grow, only happens on a local basis. If you work out your chest, then the chest muscle will experience that growth, not your quads. But there are, of course, instances where if you decide to do more of a different split, a full body workout, a squat or a deadlift, for example, which incorporates multiple muscles at the same time, then it's a very different experience and you'll get more of a systemic result of myostatin inhibition there. Inhibition, call it what you like. So this local versus systemic question ties into a bigger question of why does the body actually give us 48 hours to grow? Now, I'll connect those dots just a moment. Right, that was a moment. Let's address the question. 48-hour window, it's really important. This window is really what you work so hard for. And when it's here, take advantage of it. And by take advantage of it, I mean rest, recover, nutrition. Do what you need to do to let your body grow the best way that it can. Because it's that 48 to 72-hour window, that's when myostatin starts to rebound. The inhibition effects start to wane and it wants to protect you again, like I was saying earlier. And so it comes back and stops that muscle growth. And it comes back on a bit of a sliding scale, all depending on the individual. And again, why? Well, this goes back to what I was saying earlier in the podcast. There are two main reasons why myostatin comes back the way that it does. One is energy conservation. Muscle is expensive to build and to have. And if you need to get rid of it, it costs more to break it down as well. And from a structural point of view, your muscles can't just grow infinitely forever and ever until you're the size of a house, because you've got to think of your poor tendons and your ligaments, etc. They've got to grow too. But blood supply is not the same, so they don't grow at the same rate. So you've got to be careful there. And that's what myostatin does for you, because not everyone can do that for themselves, clearly. And surely, if you're like me, you think, hang on, this 48-hour window, it's really unfair. I work so hard to actually get my muscles to grow. That's what I want to do. So my body is just actively working against me. Surely that doesn't have to be the case. So what if you could stretch it? Now, a little later on, we'll look at satellite cells and the nutrition behind doing just that. So what we've just been talking about so far in the podcast, training frequency and overlaps and the concerns around that, is another point just to address. You're chasing that 48-hour window. So theoretically, every other day, you want to be doing a workout, right? And that can easily lead to overtraining. But you don't want that, do you? So you've got muscles that you work out directly and you've got muscles that you work out indirectly, like I was saying earlier before. Your shoulder muscles can be worked in isolation or as much as that's possible. And then other times when you're doing your back or your chest or your arms, your shoulders help out. So it's about working out when you're going to do your exercises and how these timelines fit in nicely so you can be sure that you're going to experience all or some of that 48-hour window as frequently as you can without overtraining, because that'll stuff it all up. And while we have this frequency and overlap issue, it is also good just to do a bit of deloading every now and again and to change what you're doing. Rather than working out with a heaviest weight possible with fewer reps, turn that around. Do a couple of weeks of where you're still pushing yourself incredibly hard, but in a different manner. So you're lifting a slightly lighter weight doing more repetitions, still getting a really good workout. But it takes a little bit of stress off of various parts of your body, such as your joints. And it allows your system just to take a bit of a breather before you snap back into it again and away you go. So that alternating thing or concept is really important for helping to make sure that you are resting and recovering, as well as sleep and nutrition. Don't forget those two things, especially protein. I like a nice dollop of protein, like I said earlier. And another question that's an interesting one is, does myostatin stop strength development? We've addressed muscle mass and building muscle, but it's an interesting question. But myostatin prevents the building of muscle past a certain point, etc. Whereas strength, such an interesting topic, but it's more neuromuscular. So you're training your brain to be able to figure out how to do these movements, figuring out the technique to make it more energy efficient, figuring out when to fire different muscle fibers in order to improve the way that you're building your muscles and moving through the weight, more importantly. So strength, while it is better if you have more muscle, because the potential for strength is there the larger the muscles are. Even with muscles staying the same size, you can do a lot of strength training in terms of the neuromuscular side of things. So myostatin doesn't really affect strength. It does indirectly because of the size of the muscle, but not directly. Interesting point. I'm sure you'll agree. And just to revisit that 48-hour window thing again, it's because it's so important. Consistency is one of the keys behind this 48-hour window. If you just train once or twice and you've got a 48-hour window and you sleep well, you eat well, you recover well, great. But if you just do it twice or 3 times or whatever, you don't keep it up, then the body is not convinced that there's a threat. It's not convinced that there's a need to build muscle. So when you are consistent, the body is like, geez, this stress is happening time and time and time and time again. Something's got to be done about this. So I'm going to lower the myostatin, or just let it be inhibited a little bit more, allow more muscle growth over time to occur before I shut it down. Because there seems to be a reason for the need to have muscle. And that's the trade-off. The body wants to have enough muscle to be able to function effectively, but it wants to keep less muscle, terrible phrase there, it wants to keep muscle to a minimum, there you go, in order to stop energy consumption, because it wants to conserve energy. So there's a constant trade-off. So your job is to say, I'm eating enough food. It's all good. There's enough energy. And I'm telling you there's a threat to adapt to, because look at all this resistance training I'm doing and the frequency that I'm doing it at. There's a need for muscle. And so the body goes, all right, we'll lay off the myostatin for a moment, build your muscle, and we'll see where we are. And of course, you're seeing where you are every day, every week. And the result is there's a threat, there's energy, therefore build muscle. So here you go, have your 48-hour windows. I might even extend them for you, or I might slow the rate in which myostatin comes back beyond that 48-hour window. Because remember, it's a sliding scale. So the person down the road who doesn't exercise much at all, that myostatin snaps back, and it might do it before 48 hours. But for you, because you're so consistent and because you're so dedicated, you're doing all the right things in terms of recovery, training frequency, volume, intensity, etc., the body's got much more of a reason to go beyond that 48-hour window, and it has much more of a reason to slow the return of myostatin. And that is where you want to get to for good results. So satellite cells. I told you earlier I'd talk about them, so here we are. And it is incredibly simple. The concept is mind-blowingly simple. So I'll tell you really quickly right now. Satellite cells are stem cells that are activated by damage to the muscle. And their role is growth and repair. Simple. And so to just kind of close off the subject of our good friend, myostatin, who both annoys us and helps protect us at the same time. Its suppression is more like a dimmer switch rather than an on-off switch. Just like I said in a little bit more detail earlier on, we've got a 24-hour window where it's really apparent. It normally fades by 48 hours, that peak of suppression. And then by 72 hours, it's really, the myostatin's really coming back and your muscle growth window is closing quite dramatically. But when that window closes and how fast it closes, that's the dimmer switch. It can be fast, it can be slow, who knows when. It could be someone like standing with their hand on the dimmer switch and going, just teasing you, going, I'm not moving it yet. Then all of a sudden, fast, off, or nice and gradual. And it all depends on nutrition, your rest and recovery, the intensity, the volume of your training, and the hormones that you have and what they're all doing. Sometimes I think about this whole 48, 24, 72-hour window as a construction permit. You've got the construction permit, and now you've got to get your builders in to go and build a building. But then when the construction permit ends, your builders can no longer go in there and build it unless you get another permit. And your builders are your workouts and your nutrition, etc. Your construction permit is the window that you've created because of the workout that you've done. So continue to do these workouts, continue to get these permits, continue to get your workers in to build a building, and then voila. Is it voila? Is it French? Don't know. But there you go. You've built your building, finally. And that's where you want to be. Right. Well, hope that's been informative. Just remember myostatin and manipulating it to allow yourself the best opportunity to grow is all about training intensity, training frequency, your rest and your recovery, your nutrition, how you vary your training over a long period of time to allow your body to be able to recover and not overtrain. And then there you go. You will have your window. Make sure you take advantage of it and make sure you keep getting that window. It's the maximising of that anabolic window that is only achieved through structure in your lifestyle and this will and this consistency to get in to the gym and do the work that will produce some amazing results. If you found this content interesting or helpful, or it's made you go, then please like and subscribe, or one or the other. And if you've got a comment for me, great. I'll answer them all, I promise. See you later.